April of 1945 in northern Germany felt like the world itself was holding its breath. And as our boots sank into the soaked earth of what had once been farmland, I kept telling myself the assignment was nothing more than a simple sweep. Intelligence swore the Germans had retreated from the area 3 days earlier, that the concrete bunker tucked into the ridge ahead was empty, cold, and harmless. Those assurances meant nothing the moment the steel door came into sight, and that unnatural chill crept underneath my uniform, like a living thing testing the seams. I had been in Europe for 14 months by then, enough time to recognize when the atmosphere around the place simply felt wrong. And from the instant Lieutenant Hayes raised his fist to signal a halt, the quiet around us carried a weight that didn't belong to the dying days of the war. I led the squad forward anyway, 8 men moving in a loose formation through blasted trees stripped to pale skeletons by artillery. The ridge above the shallow valley was scarred by old trenches and bomb craters filled with gray water, and each step was accompanied by the mud's greedy suction pulling at our boots. Hayes trusted me to take point, not because of rank, but because experience had carved instinct into me, the kind that kept you alive when maps lied and briefings glossed over the parts officers didn't want to acknowledge. From the moment we started climbing the slope, a faint vibration crawled through the ground, barely noticeable at first, then undeniable. 3 pulses, a pause, 3 more, the cadence too deliberate to be wind moving through debris. I tried telling myself it was machinery left running, or a generator dying somewhere deeper in the hill, but that hopeful explanation dissolved when I ran my hand across a pipe jutting from the soil and felt warmth instead of the cold metal I expected. Mines dotted the hillside here and there, wires half buried beneath the runoff. But navigating hazards wasn't what made the hair rise on the back of my neck. It was the silence, the absolute absence of birds, insects, or distant engines, broken only by that uneven heartbeat thrumming inside the rock. When we reached the top, the bunker revealed itself like a wound. A rectangle of reinforced concrete had been swallowed by the hillside, overgrown with weeds and ash-coated branches. But the door stood out immediately, a heavy steel hatch with a submarine-style wheel for a handle, its hinges oiled recently enough that no rust dulled their edges. Someone had scrawled a warning across the metal in German, and though my language skills were thin, a meaning was clear enough. Danger, do not enter, keep away. Orders didn't leave room for superstition. Hayes and I approached first, weapons ready. The wheel turned far too smoothly beneath my grip. Whoever left last had not intended for the entrance to stay sealed. Inside, the corridor exhaled a gust of refrigerated air that burned the back of my throat with something chemical, sterile and unpleasantly clean. Nothing like the rot or damp decay you expected in old fortifications. Behind me, one of the men coughed, his breath swirling visibly. Even the walls, slick with condensation, felt as though the temperature dropped the deeper we went, as if heat simply refused to exist past the threshold. The first room appeared after a left turn, small and utilitarian, with a bolted table, an overturned metal chair, and scratches carved into the concrete near the doorframe, tally marks, hopeless and patient. A cabinet held 3 empty glass bottles and folded cloths stained with old blood, arranged so neatly it felt almost ceremonial. It was all clean, too clean for a retreating force known for stripping every usable scrap before abandoning a site. We pressed onward, the hum threading itself through the walls like some hidden thing pacing just out of sight. Pipes lined the corridor ahead, some rusted, others suspiciously new, and when my glove brushed one of the freshly painted lines, the warmth beneath it twisted my stomach. Abandoned bunkers didn't have active heating. Abandoned bunkers didn't hum like they were breathing. 50 feet in, we found the first body, a German soldier sitting upright against the wall, as though he had simply grown tired and closed his eyes. His skin was gray, dry, stretched unnaturally tight across his jaw, and no wounds explained how he died. The rifle across his lap was fully loaded. No signs of a struggle, no shell casings, no blood. Just a man frozen mid-rest, with a face empty of fear, emotion, or life. The moment I realized the humming had stopped, a deeper silence filled the bunker. Something so complete, it pressed into my ears like pressure underwater. Hayes gave the order to continue, though I could see the tension in his jaw. Turning back would only mean returning again later, and none of us wanted this place hanging over our heads. Ahead, the map claimed the corridor should branch into only 2 routes, but instead we found 3. arranged like spokes on a wheel. The discrepancy felt intentional, as if the structure shifted when unwatched. Haze divided us into pairs. Dawson and I took the left passage, our flashlights cutting beams through oddly thick air that carried no dust but moved sluggishly around us. Empty bunks, a desk littered with papers dated barely 5 days earlier, and mud-wet boot prints that couldn't have dried yet, all pointed to recent presence, German presence. Before we could report back, the hum reawakened, louder than before, vibrating through the metal framework and shaking loose a flicker from an overhead bulb. Then footsteps began behind us, steady, unhurried, and unmistakably human. Dawson's hands trembled around his rifle as a tall shadow stretched across the floor and a German soldier stepped into the doorway. His face was wan, eyes dull, but not hostile. And when he spoke, the single word I understood was a warning: leave. Then he turned and walked into the corridor, vanishing without a trace. When Dawson and I reunited with the others, no one else had heard or seen a thing. Hayes didn't argue. His expression said enough. We regrouped and headed deeper, toward the black striped door where the hum felt strongest, the lock waiting as if it expected us. What waited behind it marked the moment I realized the war had brought us to a place no briefing had ever prepared us for, and nothing from the living world belonged in the room we were about to enter. If the bunker had truly been abandoned, then nothing inside should have been drawing heat. And yet the deeper we moved, the more impossible everything felt. 50 feet past the first corpse, the corridor bent slightly and revealed the second German. This one slumped in a position that suggested he'd simply folded where he stood. His uniform was unmarked, his skin gray and tightened like old parchment, and his rifle lay across his lap fully loaded, untouched. Dawson muttered a curse beneath his breath. But what struck me harder than the sight of the man was what I didn't hear. The hum had vanished. I hadn't noticed its absence until the silence pressed in around us, thick and smothering, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. No creak of metal, no distant drip of water, no faint whisper of machinery, just our own breathing, brittle and too loud in the stagnant air. Days made the decision quickly. We had our orders, and leaving now would only guarantee a second trip none of us wanted. The corridor ahead split into 3 directions, contradicting the map entirely. The layout we'd studied back at camp showed 2 narrow levels and a central command space, but what stood before us looked like a maze built without intention or logic, as if the structure had grown rather than being constructed. Hayes pointed us into groups. I took Dawson and headed left while the others disappeared into the dark with quiet nods. Even with flashlights, the air felt thick, as though it resisted being illuminated. The first room we crossed held 4 neatly arranged bunks, blankets folded at the foot, each bed strangely untouched by dust or damp. The second room housed a desk covered with newspapers. I lifted one and read the date, April 18th, only 5 days earlier. That alone meant the Germans had occupied this place far more recently than intelligence believed. Before I could process that, Dawson crouched and pointed to the floor. Fresh boot prints, wet with mud that had yet to dry, led deeper into the dark. That's when the hum returned, stronger, angrier, as if something beneath the floor recognized we were trespassing again. The papers trembled on the desk. A bulb overhead flickered once, then died. Then footsteps approached from behind us, steady, rhythmic, unmistakably human. Dawson's grip tightened on his rifle, the barrel quivering. I raised a hand to steady him. We needed to know who or what was following us. The footsteps halted just outside the doorway. A long, thin shadow stretched across the floor, wavering in the dim light. Then a voice spoke in German, calm but questioning. I didn't respond. Neither did Dawson. A figure stepped into the doorway, an older German soldier with hollow eyes and a posture that suggested exhaustion more than aggression. He stared at us without alarm, as though our presence was expected. He didn't lift his weapon. He simply murmured a single word, "Gehen, leave." Then he turned and walked away, his footsteps fading until nothing was left but the pulse of the hum. Dawson's face had gone pale. "What the hell was that?" he whispered. I didn't answer because I didn't know. When we met Hayes and the others back at the entrance branching, no one else had seen a soldier or heard the footsteps. But Dawson backed every word I said, and Hayes wasn't the kind of man to dismiss 2 shaken accounts. He ordered us to regroup and move as a single unit from here on. So we descended deeper, flashlights guiding us along a narrowing corridor where condensation clung to the steel plating like sweat on skin. The temperature dropped with every step. Frost edged some of the seams, though we were far beneath the spring thaw. The air tasted metallic, and every breath felt like inhaling cold smoke. At the end of the corridor waited the black-painted door, the single green stripe running across the middle like a warning or a boundary. The hum vibrated through the metal so strongly I could feel it resonate in my jaw. Hayes tried the handle, locked. I scanned the frame and found a small square panel near the hinge. Inside, a simple circuit with 2 wires, red and black. A child's lock. The ease of it felt like a trap. Still, I cut the red wire. The latch clicked open. The door swung inward. Pure darkness swallowed the space beyond. Not ordinary darkness. This felt like stepping into the absence of the world. My flashlight struggled, the beam seeming to flatten and lose strength the moment it passed the threshold. Hayes took one cautious step, then another. I followed. The others came in behind us, their breaths loud and trembling. The room stretched wider than any we'd encountered, the walls lined with orderly shelves stacked with uniform metal boxes, labeled only with numbers. Nothing else, no equipment, no paperwork, no signs of activity, except the table in the center. On it sat a single radio, bulky, outdated, its glass tubes glowing a faint orange, and it was humming. Every pulse we'd heard since entering the bunker had originated from this machine. None of it made sense. No power cables ran to it. No generator fed the room. Hayes approached as though afraid the air around it might shatter. He reached to adjust one of the dials. The hum climbed to a pitch that seemed to claw at the inside of my skull, then dipped into a deeper rhythm. 3 beats, pause, 3 beats, like a coded warning he had never learned to understand. Then the radio crackled sharply. A voice emerged through static, English, distorted but unmistakable. "Leave now. You're not supposed to be here." Hayes jerked his hand away. The tubes dimmed, the machine died, the hum ceased completely. We stood frozen, waiting for the next impossible thing to reveal itself. When nothing happened, Hayes whispered, "We're done. We're leaving." No one disagreed. We retreated, moving faster than discipline usually allowed, the corridor stretching longer on the way out, as though the bunker desired to hold us inside just a little longer. And somewhere behind us, deep within the concrete, the hum restarted, soft at first, then steady, patient, and aware of exactly where we were. The hum trailed us like a whisper crawling up the back of the neck, faint at first, then growing just loud enough to remind us it hadn't let go. By the time we burst through the bunker entrance and into the gray, rain-slicked daylight, every man in the squad looked as though he'd been holding his breath for hours. The sky hung low and swollen with clouds, the air strangely clean after what we'd inhaled below. We didn't speak it. We scrambled halfway down the ridge, not until the bunker lay far enough behind us to look like nothing more than a scar in the hillside. Only then did Hayes radio command, his voice even but stripped of the confidence he normally carried. He reported the structure as unstable, hazardous, and unfit for occupation. He recommended immediate demolition. Command didn't argue. They agreed to send an engineering team within 48 hours to collapse the entrance and bury everything beneath the ridge for good. None of us believed it would be that simple. We returned to the temporary base, a cluster of sagging tents pitched among the ruins of a village that had been shelled into muddy skeletons, where the rain continued without pause, turning the roads into thick rivers of brown. We were soaked constantly, our boots never fully drying. Supplies arrived late, messages arrived even later, and the promised demolition squad was nowhere to be seen. On the second day, Hayes filed another request for an update, then another. Each time the response was the same: stand by, wait, hold position. By the third day, the delay felt deliberate, though none of us dared say it aloud. The air in camp had shifted, the kind of tension that comes from knowing something is out there in the dark, but not being allowed to walk away from it. At dawn, a lone jeep finally rolled into camp with new orders. Hayes read the instructions, and his jaw clenched so tightly I thought his teeth might crack. We were being sent back. Not to blow the bunker, not yet. Command wanted full sweep this time. Photographs, measurements, documentation. Every room, every scrap of equipment, every corridor mapped out with precision. The kind of meticulous work intelligence demanded when something didn't match expectations. No one wanted to return, but refusal was not an option. We packed light, rifles, flashlights, film cameras, rope, and bolt cutters. I could see the color drain from Dawson's face as we loaded into the Jeep, but he didn't complain. The driver told us he'd wait 3 hours. If we weren't back by then, he was leaving with or without us. None of us blamed him. The sky was still thick with low-hanging clouds as we climbed the ridge again, the earth turning our boots into heavy weights. Mud clung stubbornly. Twice I nearly lost my footing on the slick incline, catching myself on exposed roots and broken concrete half buried in the slope. When the bunker entrance came into view, something felt immediately wrong. The steel door was not how we had left it. It sat partially open, tilted as if someone had just stepped inside or hurried out. The weeds around the frame were crushed flat, and fresh boot prints marked the mud in front of the threshold. Hayes knelt and inspected the prints. "German issue," he said. "Recent. Maybe last night." A cold weight settled in my stomach as I looked at the door. The wheel lock had been turned halfway, as though an attempt had been made to close it, but something interrupted the effort. Or someone realized too late that closing it wouldn't help. Weapons raised, we entered. The chemical stench was stronger now, sharper, layered with something foul and organic. The air felt heavier than before, thicker, resisting each breath. The glow from outside barely pierced the darkness. Our flashlights cut narrow paths through the cold. The first room, the field surgery space, was changed entirely. The bottles were gone. The blood-stained cloth had vanished. The cabinet door dangled open on a broken hinge, and streaks of something dark smeared across the floor, formed uneven trails leading deeper inside. I crouched and touched one of the streaks lightly. Still tacky, not old. On the wall, someone had carved new tally marks, 15 of them, ragged and uneven, as though made in desperation. The second room was worse. The bunks had been stripped bare, mattresses slashed open like trapped animals trying to claw their way out. The stuffing lay scattered like torn snowdrifts across the concrete. Above the beds, painted in thick white strokes, a German word stretched across the wall. I recognized one part, Flucht, escape. The implication hollowed out my chest. Hayes snapped a picture, hands shaking as he advanced the film. "None of this was here before," he whispered, and he was right. The deeper we walked, the more it felt as if the bunker had been lived in after we left, or worse, that it had continued living without us. We reached the T-junction. Hayes did not split us this time. We turned right together, entering the unexplored passage. The corridor was stark, bare stone, no wiring, no pipes, just a hollow, unfinished tunnel leading downward. Our footsteps echoed in strange ways, as if the sound bounced off walls that bent away from us before returning. 50 yards in, we found the second body. A young German soldier lay face down in the center of the passage. His uniform was torn. His fingers were scraped raw, nails broken and bloody, as though he'd clawed at something desperately, either trying to escape or trying to fight. Hayes rolled the body over and we recoiled. The young man's face was frozen in a look of pure terror, eyes bulging, mouth locked mid-scream. But there was no blood, no wounds, nothing that explained the horror carved into his features. Dawson heaved and vomited against the wall. The rifle beside the body was empty, all 6 rounds fired, yet not a single shell casing lay nearby. That meant he'd fired the round somewhere else and then fled here. Whatever he'd shot at hadn't left a mark. We continued, each step colder than the last. Frost spread across the walls, forming crystalline webs in the seams of the stone. Our breath billowed out in pale plumes. At the bottom of the incline, an old wooden door waited, utterly out of place among the steel and concrete of the bunker. Its heavy boards were warped with age, cracked but solid, held together by thick iron brackets. No lock. Just a simple latch, as if the barrier was never meant to keep someone out, but keep something in. Hayes hesitated, then lifted the latch. The door creaked open into a cavernous chamber that dwarfed everything we had seen so far. Smooth stone floors stretched outward until swallowed by shadow. At the center, encircled by a crumbling brick wall, yawned a massive pit, 20 feet across. The hum rose immediately, pulsing from the depths in perfect rhythm. 3 beats, pause. 3 beats, like the heartbeat of something that had been waiting for us to return. Hayes and I stepped toward the pit, rifles ready, breath shallow. At the edge, I looked down. The bottom was lost in darkness, except for a faint orange glow far below that flickered and pulsed in sync with the hum. And I realized then the bunker was not built around something. It was built over something, and whatever lay inside that pit had not been made by human hands. When we reached the rim of the pit, my flashlight beam plunged downward and vanished into a darkness so absolute it felt alive, swallowing the light before it could touch whatever lay below. Only the faint orange pulse, slow, rhythmic, impossibly deep, breathed upward from the abyss, glowing in perfect time with that unnatural 3-beat cadence that had followed us since the moment we entered the bunker. The walls of the shaft weren't rough stone or poured concrete. They were plated with bolted metal panels, etched with symbols I didn't recognize. Some spiraled, some radiated outward in repeating patterns. Others resembled diagrams, but none matched anything I'd ever seen from German engineering or from any military structure on Earth. Hayes stepped beside me slowly, swallowing hard as the vibration crawled through the soles of our boots and into our bones. "This isn't military," he murmured, voice tight. "This isn't even German." He was right. No army built something like this. No war effort poured resources into constructing a pit that sang like a machine with a heartbeat. The hum thickened, rising from the depths with a resonance that made my chest tighten, and for a moment I swore the air itself contracted around us, as if the room inhaled. A sharp crackle broke the tension. I spun around. The radio we had seen in the other chamber, the same bulky, outdated device that had spoken to us before, sat half-shrouded in shadow near the far corner of the cavern. Its glass tubes glowed with fresh orange light, casting long, jagged shadows across the stone floor. Static hissed from the speaker, sputtering and spitting, as though something was struggling to push through. Slowly, beneath the distortion, a voice began to form. It was faint at first, fractured, but unmistakably human. "Leave," the word trembled under the hum. "Now, not meant for you." Hayes didn't wait to hear more. His hand grabbed my sleeve with a force that betrayed how close he was to breaking. "We're done," he said. "We're leaving, now." As he dragged me back, something deep inside the pit exhaled, a low metallic groan that sounded like the shifting of an entire world. The vibrations surged. Dust rained from the ceiling. The symbols lining the walls seemed to ripple, distorting as the orange glow brightened from below. Then the hum changed. It became louder, faster, rising beyond rhythm into something that sounded disturbingly like breathing. Slow at first. Inhale, exhale. A long, deliberate pause. Then another inhale, louder, closer, heavier. A sound no machine could replicate. A sound no living creature should ever make. We ran. The squad sprinted across the stone chamber, roots hammering against the floor, flashlights bouncing wildly as shadows twisted on the walls. The hum, if it could still be called that, followed us, filling the corridor like a presence pressing against our backs. The air thickened. The temperature plummeted. As we passed the frozen body of the young soldier, I felt something cold brush the back of my neck, like a fingertip tracing my spine. No one dared look back. The walls seemed to narrow around us, the corridor stretching unnaturally long, as if the bunker itself resisted letting us go. When the steel door finally appeared ahead, the sudden burst of daylight felt like salvation. We stumbled into the open air, gasping, weapons raised as if expecting something to follow us out. Nothing did. The hum cut off abruptly, leaving only the harsh, ragged sound of our breathing and the faint patter of rain on mud. Behind us, the steel door sealed shut with a deep, echoing thud, even though not one of us touched it. The wheel lock spun on its own, grinding into place like a hand had reached out from inside and closed it. Hayes fumbled for the radio and called command immediately, his voice cracking as he demanded the demolition be carried out without delay. This time, they didn't argue. They promised engineers would arrive before nightfall. We didn't take chances. None of us went far from the ridge. By dusk, a convoy of 3 trucks approached, heavily loaded, headlights piercing the fog, engines growling in the wet evening air. A demolition team poured out, led by Captain Voss, a man with a cold expression and a voice that carried like gravel. He didn't ask for details. He didn't question the urgency. He didn't even look surprised. His team moved with mechanical efficiency, planting charges along the upper ridge, near the steel entrance, and at several weak points the map had indicated. Watching them work in silence felt wrong, too fast, too familiar, like they had rehearsed blowing up a place like this before. By the time the moon rose, everything was ready. At a safe distance, Voss checked his watch, then pressed the plunger. The earth snapped open. Fire erupted from the ridge in a violent column, followed by a thunderous roar that rolled over us like a shockwave. The ground trembled beneath our feet as dirt, rock, and metal burst skyward. The hillside collapsed inward, swallowed by a deafening avalanche of stone and earth. When the dust cleared, the ridge was gone, reduced to a jagged crater 50 feet deep, packed with rubble and mangled steel. The bunker was buried under 1,000 tons of rock. It was over. At least, that's what we told ourselves. We stood watching the smoke curl into the night, the silence almost too perfect, and yet something gnawed at the edges of my awareness. The crater looked wrong. Not chaotic, not blasted apart. It looked folded inward, too smooth, too deliberate, as if the ground had closed over the bunker instead of caving in. Back at camp, Hayes dismissed us to rest, but sleep didn't come. Rain tapped the canvas overhead, steady and rhythmic, and beneath it, faint, distant, impossible, I felt a sensation in the earth beneath my cot. 3 beats. Pause. 3 beats. I pressed my palm against the ground. The vibration pulsed gently through the soil, a heartbeat, slow, patient, waiting. The bunker had not died. The explosion had not killed what lived beneath it. It had only angered it or awakened it. And as I stood outside the tent hours later, rain soaking through my uniform, staring back toward the crater glowing faintly orange against the darkness, I understood the truth I would never speak aloud. We had not sealed anything. We had only released it into deeper places, where no human light could reach. Hayes didn't speak for a long time that night, not until the cigarette between his fingers had burned almost to the filter, and the embers cast a dull glow across his hollowed face. When he finally exhaled, the smoke drifted upward like a fading signal, and he admitted what I'd already suspected, that the pit, the glow, the hum, all of it had followed him even after we left the ridge. "I keep seeing it," he whispered, voice strained, eyes locked on the darkness beyond the motor pool. "Every time I blink, it's there, that light at the bottom, like it's calling from under my eyelids." I tried to reassure him, though the words felt useless even as I said them. "Memory fades," I told him. "It'll pass." But Hayes only laughed, a brittle, exhausted sound stripped of humor. "It won't," he said. "We opened something we had no business touching, and now it knows us." I felt the truth of that settle in my bones. The sense of being watched didn't leave anymore, not even in broad daylight. It lurked at the edge of thought, a silent presence that waited for moments when the world got quiet. I asked him what he thought the pit really was. Instead of answering, he reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I found an old report in the archives," he said. 1942, a German officer described hearing the same rhythmic pulse coming from caves near the Czech border. He called it Das Summen, the hum. I felt my skin tighten. What happened to them? His entire unit disappeared 2 weeks later, and the report stops mid-sentence, just ends. No follow-up, no explanation. The caves were sealed with concrete shortly afterward. Hayes crushed the spent cigarette under his boot, and the officer who filed it vanished. No record of reassignment, injury, death, nothing. A cold shiver crept through me. "You think the Germans knew what was down there?" Hayes nodded slowly. "I think they found it long before we did, and I think they tried to contain it, or maybe even study it." He looked at me then, and the flicker of firelight in his eyes made him appear older than his 27 years. That bunker wasn't built to protect soldiers. It was built to imprison something. The silence that followed felt heavy, as though the air around us braced itself for a truth we weren't meant to speak. "Then we let it out," I murmured. Hayes didn't deny it. Dawn brought no comfort. New orders arrived, sending the two of us back to the ridge, not to explore the bunker's ruins, but to survey structural integrity and ensure demolition completion. A routine inspection, they called it, but neither of us believed that. You don't send two men along for something like that unless you already suspect the site isn't done with you. We left at first light in Hayes's Jeep, the world around us unnervingly peaceful. Birds sang, the wind rustled through fresh spring leaves. To anyone else, the war might have seemed like it existed on another continent entirely. But the moment we reached the ridge, that illusion shattered. The crater yawned like a wounded mouth, wider and deeper than I remembered. Jagged pieces of metal and stone lay scattered across the slope, as though the earth had tried to spit out what it couldn't digest. Nothing should have survived the blast. Nothing should have remained. And yet, as we crept closer, the sound reached us again. Faint, familiar. 3 beats, pause, 3 beats, louder than it had been before the demolition, almost eager. Hayes and I exchanged a silent look. "It's stronger," he said softly, barely above a whisper. He was right. The explosion hadn't smothered the hum, it had amplified it. Like whatever lay beneath had been trapped under pressure for years, maybe decades, and now, freed from the weight of stone, it could finally breathe. We circled the crater consciously. About halfway around, we found it, another entrance. Smaller, narrower, hidden beneath collapsed concrete and twisted beams. A secondary tunnel, one intelligence never mentioned. One the Germans had likely kept secret even from their own. The door was bent outward, not inward, burst open by something pushing from below. Hayes raised his flashlight and aimed it into the tunnel. The beam stretched only a few feet before dissolving into thick darkness. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back. Hayes must have felt it too, because he hesitated for the first time since the war began. "We should call this in," he said. "Let the engineers handle it." But even as he said it, I could see the conflict in his expression. We both knew command would ignore us or bury the report. Whatever was down there, whatever the Germans had tried to hide, no one wanted soldiers like us knowing more than necessary. Hayes swallowed hard, then made a decision. 5 minutes, he said, just to confirm the structural collapse. Then we leave. I wish I had argued, wish I had refused. But the truth is, some part of me needed to know, needed to see, needed to understand why the hum wouldn't stop. We descended into the tunnel together. The walls here weren't clean concrete like the main bunker. They were carved earth and jagged stone, raw and ancient. Water dripped from the ceiling, each drop echoing through the passage like a faint metallic pain. The air was colder, heavier, thicker with each step. The hum grew louder, more focused, more deliberate, and beneath it, something else, something like movement. We reached a chamber unlike anything inside the original bunker. The walls were carved with markings, thousands of them, scratched into the stone in overlapping spirals and lines. Some resembled symbols, some were crude diagrams. Some were nothing but frenzied slashes, as though drawn by someone trying desperately to record what the mind couldn't comprehend. At the center of the chamber, a shallow depression held a pool of murky water. And from beneath that surface came the glow, faint, orange, pulsing, alive. "That's it," Hayes whispered. "That's the source." The water vibrated with each beat, rippling outward in perfect circles. 3 pulses, pause, 3 more. Eternal, mechanical, alive. I crouched to examine the glow more closely. At first I thought the shifting shapes beneath the water were reflections, but then the shapes moved against the ripple pattern, flowing like liquid fire curling upward, brushing the underside of the surface as if seeking a way through. And in that moment, I felt it. Not a sound, not a vibration, a presence. Something aware, something waiting, something watching. We had to leave, now. But before I could speak, I saw Hayes's expression change, his eyes widening, his face going slack. He stared into the water with an intensity that terrified me, his lips silently repeating words I couldn't hear over the rising hum. I grabbed his arm. He didn't fight me, but he didn't look away either. Only when the glow surged upward, bursting so bright it burned after images across the stone walls, did he stumble back. The chamber shook, dust rained down, the hum rose to a shriek. I dragged him up the tunnel, my shoulder under his arm, the air behind us vibrating with a force that felt like the heartbeat of something enormous trying to break through stone. We didn't stop until daylight hit our faces and the cold wind slapped breath back into our lungs. Hayes collapsed beside the Jeep, trembling violently. When he finally looked at me, his eyes were different, empty, hollow, shaken to their core. "Did you see it?" he whispered. "I saw something," I said. "No," he murmured. "It saw me." We drove back to camp in a silence so complete it felt unnatural. The hum still settled somewhere between my ribs like a pulse that wasn't mine. Hayes stared straight ahead the entire ride, hands gripping the wheel too tightly, his knuckles white against the leather. When we arrived, he filed only a brief, sanitized report, one claiming the demolition had been effective and no further inspection was needed. It was a lie, and we both knew it, but the officers accepted it without a single question. 2 days later, Hayes received reassignment orders to Berlin. He left without ceremony, without a goodbye to the men he'd led for over a year, and I was left with a feeling I couldn't name, part dread, part certainty that something had followed us back from the ridge. The days after his departure were simple on paper: process prisoners, distribute rations, wait for new orders. But beneath the routines, something hollow gnawed at the edges of thought. The war was ending, Hitler dead, Berlin fallen, the Germans' surrender splintering across Europe. Men celebrated, got drunk, talked about home and futures they weren't sure they deserved. But I couldn't join them. Every night I lay awake hearing the same rhythm: 3 beats, a pause, 3 more. Soft, patient, as constant as breathing. At first I tried to ignore it, pretending it was nothing more than exhaustion or ringing from artillery. But exhaustion doesn't creep into the world around you. Exhaustion doesn't synchronize with your heartbeat. Exhaustion doesn't whisper from the dark corners of your barracks. Dawson was the first to notice the change in me. One morning he pulled me aside, eyes heavy with worry. "You look like hell, Corporal," he said. "Are you even sleeping?" I lied and said yes. The truth was I hadn't slept more than an hour at a time since we left the crater. Dawson shook his head. "Your hands shake when you hold your rifle," he said. "And you keep counting under your breath all the time." He wasn't wrong. I tried stopping. I really did. But the counting came automatically. 3 beats, pause, 3 more. No medic could fix that. No pill could mute something I felt not in my ears, but in my bones. On May 15th, the night air still cool with spring, Hayes found me. I don't know how he returned without word, how he slipped past every guard or checkpoint, but at 2 in the morning he sat beside me outside the barracks like he'd never left. His face was even thinner than before, cheeks sunken, eyes bloodshot, hands trembling slightly as he lit a cigarette. We didn't speak at first. We just listened to the quiet, the way soldiers do when silence feels heavier than noise. Finally he whispered, "You hear it too, don't you?" I didn't pretend. I nodded. His shoulders sagged, some tension bleeding from him, but not enough to make him look whole. "I thought I was losing my mind," he said. "But then I realized it's not random. It's a pattern, almost like Morse, but wrong." "It's not code," I said softly. "It's a heartbeat." Hayes took a slow drag, exhaled shakily, then spoke the words I feared. I went back. My throat tightened. "What?" "2 days ago. I took a Jeep, drove back to the ridge alone." He rubbed a hand over his face. "I just needed to know." His voice was hollow. "The demolition team collapsed the hillside. That much is true." He paused. "But the bunker isn't sealed. Not all of it. There's another entrance on the north side. Hidden by trees, not on any map." My stomach churned. "You went inside?" He shook his head. "No, but I got close." He leaned in, voice barely a whisper. The door was open, just a crack, and the hum. He swallowed. It was louder than before. Clear, like it knew I was there. A silence stretched between us, heavy, suffocating. Hayes crushed the cigarette under his boot. "I filed a report," he said. "Told intelligence what I saw. Recommended a second demolition. They told me they'd look into it." I met his gaze and understood the truth before he said it. "You don't believe them?" "No," he said, "I don't. 2 days later, he was gone again, reassigned without warning, this time permanently. The morning transport whisked him away before the sun had fully risen. Before he left, he pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand. "If something happens to me," he said, "make sure this gets to someone who will listen." I waited until he disappeared into the back of the Jeep before I looked at the paper. Inside was a hand-drawn map of the ridge, more detailed than anything Command had given us. And marked at the top, circled heavily, was the hidden northern entrance. At the bottom, in harsh capital letters, he'd written, "Do not open." I kept the map buried in my footlocker. I should have burned it, should have taken it as a warning. But part of me, the part that still heard the hum every night, knew better. This wasn't over. It wasn't waiting for orders or permission. Whatever lived beneath that ridge had patience older than any war. 5 days after Hayes vanished, a man dressed in a gray civilian suit arrived at camp. He carried a leather briefcase and a badge he showed only long enough to prove he could. He introduced himself as Mr. Ashford, though the way he said the name made it clear it wasn't his real one. He asked for me specifically. Inside the command tent, he leafed through my service record as though he already knew it by heart. Then he looked up and asked about the bunker. Not just general details, exact things, the pit, the radio, the bodies, the hum. He used a different phrase for it, acoustic anomaly. I told him everything, not because I trusted him, but because lying felt pointless. The man already knew too much. He wrote notes in a small book, expression unreadable. When I finished, he closed the book and said without hesitation, "You're being discharged." My breath caught. "On what grounds?" "Medical," he said. "Exhaustion, auditory hallucinations, stress-related deterioration." He spoke clinically, as if reading from a script. "Your transport leaves tomorrow morning." It didn't matter that I wasn't hallucinating, that the sound was real, that whatever waited under that ridge wasn't finished. The military had decided the easiest way to silence me was to send me home, and I understood I had only two choices: accept it quietly, or end up buried under paperwork in a sanitarium somewhere. I accepted. The next morning, I boarded a transport ship bound for New York with a duffel bag, a faded uniform, and a heartbeat in my head that did not belong to me. The engines thrummed constantly during the crossing, their vibrations shaking the metal hull, and through it all, woven seamlessly into the mechanical rhythm, was the hum. 3 beats. Pause. 3 more. Even the ocean couldn't drown it. Even distance couldn't quiet it. When the ship docked and I stepped onto American soil, the celebrations of victory felt like they belonged to another world, one untouched by what we had seen. I slipped through the crowds, boarded a train to Chicago, and tried to build a life from the pieces the war had left me. But the hum came with me, in every rattling pipe, in every flickering streetlight. In the stillness right before sleep, it whispered through the walls like a reminder, a promise, a warning, and it never stopped. Life after the war became a long, quiet performance. Work, routine, silence, and I played my part well enough that most people never suspected anything was wrong. I found a job as a building inspector, married a kind woman who never pushed me about the nightmares I refused to describe, and moved into a small house on the north side of Chicago. To anyone watching, I was simply another veteran trying to stitch normalcy back together. But inside that house, in the dark stillness of early mornings, the hum lingered like a second heartbeat woven into the walls. My wife would ask sometimes why I never spoke about Germany. I always told her there was nothing worth remembering. She accepted that answer, but I think she sensed there was more beneath it. Spaces I refused to fill, doors I refused to open. At night, after she drifted to sleep, I would lie awake listening to the silence that wasn't silent at all. The hum lived there, patient and steady, pressing against my skull, until I found myself wandering through the house, palms against the wallpaper, searching for a source I would never find. It didn't matter whether I was in the bedroom, the kitchen, or the basement. The rhythm followed. 3 beats, pause, 3 more. Sometimes faint, sometimes sharp, always present. In early 1948, a letter arrived without a return address. Inside was a clipping from a German newspaper dated the previous year. The headline, once translated, described a sinkhole that had opened near an abandoned military site in northern Germany. No casualties, no nearby villages affected, no official cause identified. The article noted that the area had long been closed to civilians and was now being reinforced with concrete to prevent further collapse. At the bottom of the clipping, in a hurried pencil scrawl, someone had written, "It's still there." I burned the letter that night, but the words stayed with me like the taste of ash. Years passed in a muted blur. In 1953, I saw Dawson's name in the obituary section. He had died in his sleep at the age of 31. No official cause given. At the funeral, his widow told me he had suffered terrible nightmares, waking in the night screaming about walls closing in, about a sound he couldn't escape, no matter where he went. The doctors blamed nerves, trauma, stress. I didn't have the heart to tell her the truth, that something far older than fear had followed him home. After that, I tried finding Hayes. I wrote letters to the Army, appealing to records offices, to veterans associations, anyone who might have seen his name or heard of his reassignment. Every response came back the same. No record of a Robert Hayes matching his description. As if he'd never existed, as if he'd been erased. I stopped searching when the reality became impossible to deny. Whatever had looked up at him from beneath that ridge had taken more than just his sleep. The hum never left. It became a companion I never asked for, an uninvited lodger embedded in the rhythms of the world around me. I learned to live with it the way one learns to live with a scar, always there, always aching when the weather changes. In 1967, a man from the government knocked on my door. Clean suit, polished shoes, a badge he flashed only once. He asked a series of routine questions about my service, speaking politely, almost casually. Then he asked if I had ever heard of something called Operation Silent Fortress. I told him no. He smiled like he already expected that answer. Before he left, he paused at my doorway. "Just so you're aware," he said, "this site was decommissioned in '59. Everything of interest has been removed and disposed of. There's nothing left there." But his eyes said something else, something he wasn't allowed to speak aloud. That night, I dreamed of the bunker for the first time in nearly a decade. I stood alone in the dark corridor, staring at the steel door with the green stripe. The hum screamed from the underside, shaking the walls. When the wheel lock turned on its own, opening the door inward, I saw the pit again, only now the glow had spread up the walls, crawling like veins of molten light. The radio hung suspended above it, tubes burning white hot, and from the speaker came a voice clear as daylight. "You were warned." I woke to my wife's hand on my shoulder, her voice soft with concern. I lied and said it was only a bad dream. She believed me. She always did. But after she fell back asleep, I walked to the window and stared out at the empty street. Even through the glass, I could hear the hum, 3 slow pulses, vibrating through the wires of the street lamps, threading itself through the quiet night. 3 beats, pause, 3 more. I'm an old man now. Most of the men I served with are gone. The world has marched forward, eager to forget its darker corners. But something buried beneath a German hillside in 1945 did not forget us. It has waited patiently, whispering through the earth, through the static of radios, through the stillness between heartbeats. Most people will never hear it. They will live their entire lives blissfully deaf to the sound beneath the surface. But I hear it. I have always heard it. And I know this much. We never should have opened that door. We were never meant to look into that pit. Whatever lived down there, whatever the Germans tried so desperately to contain, didn't die under the rubble. It endured. It learned. It watched. Sometimes on sleepless nights, I think of Hayes and wonder if he still hears it too, or if it finally claimed him the way it's been slowly claiming me. The hum is patient. It will wait. It doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need to be answered. It only needs to be heard once. Because once you hear it, truly hear it, it embeds itself in you like a parasite made of rhythm and silence. 3 beats, pause, 3 beats. Even now, as I write this, I can feel it vibrating through the floorboards, through my bones, through the blood in my veins. If you're reading this, I pray you never hear it. I pray you never find yourself counting in the dark the way I do. But if one night, when the world is quiet, you hear a soft pulse rising from the silence. 3 beats, a pause, then 3 more. Then you will understand the truth we uncovered too late. Some things were never meant to surface. Some doors should stay closed. Some sounds should remain buried. And once they aren't, they never stop listening back. So that's the truth of what we found beneath that ridge in 1945, and why the hum never really left any of us who heard it. If you're still here listening, then maybe you felt it too, somewhere in the silence between your own heartbeats. If you want more stories pulled from the shadows of old battlefields and buried operations the world tried to forget, hit that subscribe button and sound off in the comments where you're watching from. This is Captain Rebel, signing off, but remember, some echoes don't fade, they follow.